look. I love that. People are sure going to be paying attention to them right now.
And we're ready.
Hi, hello. So welcome to the 75th Annual Hunger Games, or as I like to call it, making Katniss Everdeen's wedding dress from Catching Fire. So I have just had my hair done and do realise I look exactly like Caesar Flickerman from the interview, which is quite a fun little coincidence, and yeah, so I'm gonna just only envision myself as him now, so if I'm acting extra flamboyant, that's why. So I recently saw her dress in an exhibition in Las Vegas. I'll put up some pictures kind of around me in a cloud, but it looks so good in person. Like, it looked incredible. The second I saw it, I turned to my mum and dad and I said, I'm making that dress when I get back. So I actually have loads of, I'll put my notes on the side of the screen as well, but I have loads of notes and like 10 billion photos of it. So I'm going to try and make this we're using, like, I can see exactly how the thicknesses of ribbons and stuff were, so I'm really excited about this one. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of the fabric and then we'll get into it. Okay, so the first step of any dress is finding all the right fabrics. Okay, so first of all, if any of you have ever seen Katniss's dress, you know you need a lot of net. So I have a giant roll here. This is the same net I use for my petticoats. It's a nice kind of thick dressmaker's net. It has a nice bit of body to it. So this is what I'll be using for all the big frills and gathers and sections on her skirt. I think this started off as a 40 metre roll, but I did use some of it, so I think it's down to about 30 now, around that. I might need a bit more. I'm hoping I won't, but we'll kind of see how well it holds itself up. Step number 2. Supply you need in any wedding dress: white satin. So I think this is slightly less pure white and more of an ivory, but still not ivory, if that makes sense. So many shades of white. This is kind of just slightly off-white, but it's a really nice colour because in person her dress kind of looks a bit off-white. It doesn't look fully white, and then the tulle is kind of a bit more white, and then the ribbon is a bit darker and more of an ivory. So it's got kind of those tones going through it. So this will act as the base of the bodice and the base of the skirt before I add all the ruffles. Next up, this. Now, this was not originally intended for this dress, but as soon as I saw Katniss's dress, I knew it would be perfect. I think I got this from Barbie Swan Lake, if I remember correctly. Here we go. So it's actually like this gorgeous organza base with all of these feathers running across it. So you can see how there's bits of lace and bits of feather and all that sort of thing. So it's really cute, and I think it'll work really nicely for adding kind of those extra little bits of details along the bodice underneath all the others. And I was not looking forward to working with feathers, so the fact that they're all attached onto like this, already attached onto an organza base with some lace and stuff like that, really helpful. So when I saw the dress in person, I'll show some like close-up pictures and just explain it. But she has like a fabric that's cut into feathers, but not actually feathers. It looks like it's been laser cut. It looked really cool. And it looked like it was some kind of thin lining fabric. I wasn't quite sure what kind, obviously, because I couldn't get super up close. But it looked like some kind of relatively thin lining fabric. Because it had that kind of satiny quality, but still definitely this is the thing I could compare it to the most when I was looking at it in person. So this is what I have. So I'm going to try and cut this on my cry cut. We'll see if it works. If not, I might just either have to do it by hand or scissors, or we'll kind of see. I'm guessing they laser cut it originally, so I'll have to map out a design for that, and then this will be going kind of around the base of the bodice. And then lace. So on her little frill things, she has 2 different types of trim. She has a lace trim and some velvet ivory ribbon. So it actually, ironically, took me ages to find the ivory ribbon because you needed 4 different widths and stuff. But it took me even longer to find a lace that I liked because it kind of had a square edge to it and little sections. But I eventually found this because it's still thin and it looks kind of about the same material. And I'm going to cut it in half, but I've just folded it for now for an example. And that's what I'm going to use. So I kind of like a half thickness one like that, and it's just the right thickness. Took me ages to find it though. But hopefully I've got enough here. So that is the lace. Oh, so I also have sequins. So it's just a couple of different colours. They use Swarovski. I'm using cheap from Amazon. And then finally we have the box. So the box is full of all the velvet ribbon I'm gonna need, hopefully. I'm unfortunately thinking I might need more. But on her dress, she has basically 4 different thicknesses of ribbon. I'll put a picture up here in a sec. So I needed to find somewhere that was selling not only velvet ribbon, which is harder to find than the average satin ribbon. I also had to find velvet ribbon in ivory, and then velvet ribbon in ivory, which they sold in 4 different sizes, which are the sizes I needed. So it was a bit of a job tracking them down, but once I tracked it down, I actually found a UK seller, and ironically, it was a wedding shop for like wedding invitations. So I found the ribbon I needed in the 4 different sizes I needed. So it's kind of, I'll show you when I'm actually doing it, but it phases up. So it starts with the biggest and goes up to the smallest on the skirt with kind of like the ruffles and stuff. So that is what we're aiming for. In the giant box, I think there's about, I ordered about 100 meters of ribbon there. So I'm hoping that will be enough. We shall see. Fingers crossed. Okay, so that is the materials I have. So I'm going to attempt to make this dress. The first part of it will definitely be making up the skirt base, so the satin base, and I'm pretty sure, looking at the pictures, there was a plain dress net over the top of that layer, presumably to blend in kind of if you looked underneath, which was just a plain layer without any frills, and then the frills on top. So first of all, we're starting with that layer. So the satin skirt, then the dressmaker's net. Okay, so the base skirt was basically the simplest part of this whole dress. It was literally just a basic white satin skirt with a tulle overlay. So to draft this skirt, I ignored me dancing like a fool. It was very late at night at this point. To draft these skirts, I tend to just literally place them on the mannequin. So for me, because my mannequin is basically my measurements, it's super easy, but depending on what your waist measurement is, you might need to mark it something different. But I literally just hang it from the point of the corner of the fabric, pin it in place and cut it to the hem, and then repeat that the whole way round. So you end up with kind of like a circle skirt, but it's a lot more fitted at the top than it would be in a circle skirt, and quite drapey at the bottom. So it works really well if you need something that doesn't have a lot of volume at the top, so it's not going over a hoop skirt. So this would not work for like most of my princess dresses, because they tend to need to go over a hoop, which means they need to be quite big and poofy at the top, versus this one just needed to hang flat and just needed to basically be something I could put everything else on. Because this layer is literally just acting as like a base for me to sew the ruffles down. So if I have that volume already, it's easier for me to attach the ruffles, so I can kind of get that flow, because her dress has such a gorgeous flow when she spins, and I really want to capture that. So here I am, just literally cutting the hem. I always make it slightly longer. I know some people don't like them longer, but I like having that gorgeous long float, especially because I'm quite short. So I will usually wear quite high heels. So this mannequin is fit to my height, so just making it a bit longer means I can wear longer heels. And I quite like the float. I think it looks quite princessy when it's longer, and I just really like the look it gives. So draping it here is where I'm just making sure the front is all level, which is a pretty easy thing. It's just kind of eyeballing, and it's all gonna get hemmed at the end anyway. So the levels really do not have to be that exact at this point. Next was the back. So her dress has a huge train, like a really, really big train. So I knew I needed to add quite a lot of drape at the back with this skirt, so I could put the back ruffles. They had something to sit on, because even though they'll come a bit further back from the skirt, because they'll kind of hang off the end, I knew it still needed to be quite long anyway. So I just made sure to make the train quite a bit longer than the rest of the skirt. Honestly, once again, I just kind of made this up as I go along. So I just kind of saw where I wanted it leveled, marked the things on each side of the fabric, and cut in between. You can also rip your fabric. So here, I love ripping fabric. You can rip it and it will rip in an exact straight line, and it makes life so much easier. So if your fabric rips, give it a try. Admittedly, my method to see if fabric will rip is often just cut a little tear and then yank it and see if it rips. Do not try this with expensive fabric. I am just a bit lazy at times, so that's why I was just testing it out. But it's so fun to do. Like, just ripping along a seam of fabric is so much fun. So here I am just using that method to get the exact same size pieces for the back, and then just putting them back to back. You do need quite a lot of space for this method, so I ended up using my kitchen, but you can kind of use anywhere that has enough space for you to hang the fabric flat, because if it ends up being poking up or like lying on something, you will not get like a flat hem and everything will kind of be uneven. So just make sure you have enough room that you can kind of let the fabric drape down, especially if you have a huge train. I remember draping Elena of Avalor's train. Her train is like 3 meters long, so draping that was a logistics nightmare. It looked gorgeous, but I think I ended up like having to move a lot of furniture around so I could draft that train. Okay, so I'm just pinning this on and cutting. Honestly, it is literally just quite repetitive, so it's quite fun actually when you can just kind of repeat it. What am I doing there? I don't know what I was doing there, sorry. And it's just a case of paneling, so I think in the end I ended up with 1 front panel, 2 side panels, and 2 back panels. So the back had the super long train, so that's why I ended up putting 2, and then you can put a zip in the back, was the fastening. So you can add more panels if you want it to be fuller. So I think when I made my Aurora dress, I used the same method, but I think I had 2 lots of side panels on each side. So 6 panels in total. No, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 panels, sorry, in total, versus in this one where there were only 5. And here she is already starting to come together. I really like the colour of this satin actually. It's not quite a pure white, it's kind of more an off-white, so it kind of has that really nice kind of like subtle look to it rather than like being such a stark white. It's already starting to look like a wedding dress. I think this is the second wedding dress I've made. Working with all white always feels really weird because I'm used to quite a lot of colour. So it's nice to work with white, but also it's like everything shows up, so it can get a bit repetitive at times. And here we have the final result. So as you can see, the final skirt ends up quite long, understandably because it needs everything to be attached onto it, and the ruffles will fall really quite far anyway, so this just needs to act as the base. But here she is. You have the nice long front and then the even longer train when I turn her around. So once I had the base satin skirt, I went in with the tulle, which was going to literally be the exact same skirt, just made up in the white tulle. So I cut out all my pieces in the exact same way. I'm not going to show you the process because it's literally the exact same thing. But it's just draping it on the mannequin. I had to check like the length, so double check when you're doing this that your fabric actually goes long enough to drape the whole way down, because some rolls can be very short for an unknown reason. So just check it's the normal like 45 to 50 inches, or is it, no, it's 50 to 60. I can't remember the natural length, but something like that. Versus like the 30-inch length rolls you can get sometimes, which is just too short for what you need. Tulle is usually usually an easy bet though, because they sometimes come in extra wide, which if you can get an extra wide is absolutely amazing. Here you go, me cutting straight into the tulle, because beautiful thing about net is it does not fray. So the seams do not have to be finished, which is a lifesaver. So here she is all assembled and placed over the top. So you can already see she kind of softens the satin, and it just kind of gives me that extra base, so if the satin shows through, it kind of has that net over the top so it doesn't look as harsh. I did not actually film most of the bodice, unfortunately, so I only have this little shot of me putting the boning in it. But it's one of my basic bone bodices, so if you want to see how I made this, I also have a couple of other videos on it. And you can see me not realising the camera is not set properly, so I will slowly disappear from the frame. But I use steel hoop boning to bone my bodices at 10mm, and a giant pair of steel cutters to cut it. I also had that really cute floral lining fabric, which was adorable. Here I am disappearing from view, but this bodice was just a simple strapless bodice with eyelet back, just so I could do it up easily and it would support the whole thing. She has quite a low back as well, so I needed the straps, which I added later when I kind of had everything assembled. And now the skirt frills, which is the most long-winded process, but it looks super cool. It looks awful. I have definitely got the wrong ribbon, because instead of looking like a nice off-white ivory, it looks yellow. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board on the ribbon and try and order some more ribbon and try and go with a lot more white than I was really expecting to have to go, which is a surprise. So you can see here it kind of looks really ivory and really not white and not off-white and not blending in at all, which is very frustrating. On the bright side, I've kind of got a system down for getting it onto the actual tulle. So yeah, so back to the drawing board on that one. Okay, so as you can see, kind of went a bit off script there, but my new ribbon arrived. So the original ribbon I ordered, which I got about 50 meters of, was just far too yellow, so I'm gonna have to use it for a different project. So if anyone has any ideas for yellow ribbon projects, let me know. But this pure white was immediately, I knew it was right. So first of all, I took my stiff net and I added horsehair braid to the entire hem. So I realised that they were just falling a little too flat, and this just adds like that just extra poof and that extra kind of shape to them, which was really helpful, and it really needed it. Because I was wondering why everything was falling a little bit flat. So I'm not sure what they use in the real dress, but I did this was the way I found it, and you can get horsehair braid in large amounts for super cheap on places like Amazon. So the base of each frill is just 2 layers of tulle with a horsehair braid sewed to the bottom, along on the top and bottom edge to make sure it holds in firm, because if you only attach it on one edge, I always find it flips up and it moves around. So it just ensures that everything stays in the place you want it to stay, which is very important when you have so many frills going onto this skirt. Hi, okay, so I got more net. I have bought 2 fabric shops out of their stiffest dressmaker's net, but this roll has 50 meters on it. I got them just as they did the restock, so there should be absolutely no problems. This should be enough to finish her off. So yes, so I shall be gathering tulle for the next 10 years. I'll probably put on my gravestone, still gathering tulle. So I will regret this 20 meters in the future, and I'll still have 30 to go. So once I got all my extra tulle, one of the biggest users, ironically actually, was the fact that I had to add all those ruffles to the hems. So in order to cut those, it was quite simple. I just rolled up my tulle exactly like it would be on a bolt, only a little bit wider, and then cut all the pieces in one go, as you can see here. Because if I had to cut and measure every single one, I would have lost my mind, since there's just so many ruffles. So to do this, as you can see, cut up, and I think each ruffle ended up being, well, they graded them, like varied by size, so I think the biggest one was 4 inches and the smallest was 2 inches in the end. To measure them, I got my tape measure and laid it across the net and then just cut in little notches. Now the beautiful thing about tulle is it does not fray. One of the beauties of working with it, not many of them, but this is definitely a plus side of this fabric. So I just leveled the edges first, because whenever you fold like a tulle, sometimes it can like fold up on itself or whatever, so it can be a bit uneven at the ends. So I just leveled them off and then cut and measured my ruffles. And here you have my final ruffle piles. So these were all gathered by hand, because unfortunately my gathering foot broke, which is a machine foot that you can use to auto gather fabric. So here they all are, 2 inches, 3 inches and 4 inches are the sizes I ended up going for, and then these are all attached on like so. So in order to attach them, I made sure everything was ironed first of all, so they were all lying flat, and then just stitched along the top edge of the ruffle. So on the actual dress, every ruffle's edge to cover that little sewn edge with the gathering stitch is covered by ribbon. I did not have enough ribbon for that, so I only did the top one, as you can see there. But each velvet ribbon is sewn down with a layer of lace in the middle. The lace only needs 1 stitch down the middle. The ribbon, I added 1 on either side on the little satin, kind of tiny satin edge to hide the stitching and to make sure the ribbon held down really nicely. And as you can see, it worked really well. It was just quite repetitive. And finally, I was able to start laying the frills onto the skirt so I could actually see how it was going to look. So it was very much kind of a waiting game and a process, and just kind of seeing how everything fell. I knew I wanted like one around frill base to kind of lay everything else off, but then her skirt lies in a very strange way. The way it falls and the way the curves are moved are very particular, and it kind of takes a lot of kind of folding in on itself and up and down, and kind of the layers are not as straight across as I originally thought. Originally, I was kind of layering like you would layer like any skirt where it kind of goes around and around and around, versus hers seemed to actually, when I was draping it, fall downwards. So you kind of like have one fall down, folded, and then have it come back up versus having it go around, which was a learning curve, but it was interesting to see. So as you can see here, I'm trying to figure out how to drape, and it's starting to actually drape downwards. I cut all of my frills to the exact same size and then just trim them as needed, because her skirt is so huge, you really need that length. The only time you did not need that length was for the top of the bodice, because there's a little frill that comes off the bodice and around the back that is a lot shorter than the others, and the frills on that are a little bit different, so it only has 2 lines of ruffles and a couple of lines of ribbon, so I had to make that one specially. Other than that, you can just see how I kind of just had to just mess around and drape, and it was actually a lot of fun to kind of figure out and pin and figure out where everything was falling. And here you have the final skirt. So all of this was hand sewn down. I sat there with my little needle and thread, and yes, this is how it turned out. So I was actually super happy with how the skirt looked. It's so poofy and big and fluffy, and it just feels like magic. Ironically, it is actually probably my biggest dress to store, because these ruffles just do not condense. So there you get the big twirl and the big fluff. She is so much fun to spin in because she just kicks up, which I was really looking forward to from the film, because she gets like that flamey in the bottom. Now 3D details. So this is kind of what makes Katniss's dress special, is that big cage and all the feathers. So first of all, I draped this feather fabric I had. So if you remember when I was showing my materials, it has like an organza base and a bunch of feathers and lace. So it already adds kind of like that 3D element she had on hers. So I'm not sure how they did it in the actual dress, but this is how I'm doing it. So I trimmed it to kind of the size I needed and where it fell. So it kind of fell just off the bodice, and it was kind of like asymmetrical from what I could see from the actual dress. So I kind of draped and kind of layered it, but I wanted some feathers to peek over. So once that was done and hand stitched down, now came to the cage, which I used for warbler. So first of all, I kind of pattern drafted it in paper, kind of figured out where I wanted it to fall. I realised after that I think I'd done the back piece a little bit wrong, but I kind of went from my photos. But I liked how it ended up turning out, so that was okay. So here is, after the paper, I traced it onto the warbler and cut all those holes by hand, which was an absolute nightmare. It looked like a war zone after I finished because it was just warbler everywhere. But I really like how it ended up turning out. So once I'd done that, it just ended up needing spray painting. So I thought that was giving me kind of like a nice actual kind of finish. And all the rhinestones. So this entire thing was covered from head to toe in rhinestones. I was just sat there with my rhinestone glue covering the entire thing, which made it quite heavy, but not nearly as heavy as I thought. And it was stitched down onto the straps. So I just reused some velvet ribbon for the straps, which kind of tied it in with the rest of the dress. And all the feathers, which was super fun. So I had to kind of drape the warbler and kind of form it over the dress. But here is the finished product. So I really enjoyed making this dress. It was, after seeing it, like actually being able to make it was just like a dream. I did not actually think it would turn out like quite as well as it did, especially the cage, which working with warbler is something I've not really done before. So I was just over the moon. Oh, I did add a petticoat though. As you can see here, I'm shoving it over now. It's like my Anastasia petticoat. It has like a lot of chiffon at the bottom, so it just adds that little bit of extra flow, because when I was trying on her dress, I realised that the frills are very heavy. So by adding that petticoat, it kind of keeps that little bit of poof at the bottom and makes her extra poofy, which is extra nice. So here's just my dad helping me lace up the corset, which is an absolute faff because he kept getting poked in the face by the warbler. I did add extra supports after this to the cage because it kept falling down at the back. So just kind of attached it more to the ribbon and made sure it stayed upright because it kept kind of flopping backwards. But there's not too many holes because she has quite a low back, which is nice. So it's quite easy to do it once you're in it. And here is the final dress. So she was just so magical. It feels like a dream wearing this dress. I ended up wearing her to Comic-Con actually, which was so much fun. And her train is it just feels like magic. It's not uncomfortable as well. I thought the cage would be a lot more uncomfortable to wear than it is. But yeah, so here she is. thank you so much for watching. This is just kind of like, I know this is quite a quick little description, but yeah, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more, please like and subscribe, and I will be posting a lot more tutorials in the future. Hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much for watching again. Bye.